Delighted to have the Attorney General of the state of Vermont with us today, Charity Clark. But let me begin. Donald Trump is not only wrong, but he is dangerously wrong when he calls climate change a hoax. Climate change is not a hoax. It is an existential threat to Vermont, to our country, and to the entire world. And that's not just Bernie Sanders' opinion, that is the opinion of virtually every scientist who has studied the issue. Not surprisingly, sadly, but not surprisingly, during his campaign for president, Trump promised the fossil fuel industry, where just 4 big oil companies made $84 billion in profits last year, that he would do everything he could to help them in exchange for large campaign contributions. You help the fossil fuel industry, they pour tens of millions of dollars into your campaign, and that is exactly what he is doing. He has been making massive cuts to all kinds of projects which will transform our energy system away from fossil fuel and into sustainable energy, while at the same time he is supporting projects that will increase carbon emissions and endanger the future of this planet. At a time when we have to bring the entire world together, every country in the world together, to cut carbon emissions, to fight climate change, Donald Trump is doing exactly the opposite, and in doing that is threatening the well-being of our kids and future generations. Several years ago, as part of the Inflation Reduction Act, I passed a $7 billion piece of legislation called Solar for All. What this legislation does is provide loans and grants to lower-income and working-class Americans so that they can install solar panels on their rooftops or participate in community-based solar projects. As part of that overall legislation, the state of Vermont receives $62 million, a lot of money for a small state. What this legislation does is not just cut carbon emissions, it substantially lowers the electric bills for those who participate by 70, 80, or 90%. Let me repeat that. Depending on your location and the solar exposure of your home, this legislation could reduce electric bills by up to 90% for those who participate. It is estimated that in Vermont, some 8,000 households would benefit from this program. Nationally, the estimate is over 900,000 households. Further, as we install solar panels, we create many hundreds of jobs, good-paying jobs in Vermont. So that is what this legislation does. Cuts carbon emission, it creates jobs, and it substantially lowers the electric bill for many, many thousands of people in Vermont and close to 1 million people nationally. In other words, this is a win-win-win piece of legislation. Not surprisingly, sadly, but not surprisingly, Trump and his friends in the oil and coal companies want to terminate this program. Imagine that. 900,000 households see a substantial reduction in their electric bills. We cut carbon emissions, and Trump and his friends in the fossil fuel industry want to kill this program. And that is what the EPA did. That's what Trump's EPA did, terminated the program. But let us be clear, this struggle is far from over. All across this country, citizens and state governments are fighting back. People want to cut carbon emissions. The American people want lower cost electricity. And that is why I have led 31 of my colleagues in the Senate last week in calling on EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin to immediately restore Solar for All and to slash utility bills for people in Vermont and throughout this country. And that is also why last week a coalition of states filed 2 lawsuits against the EPA for illegally terminating Solar for All. Let's be clear, their action is illegal. This money was appropriated by Congress. It was signed by the president. You can't just take back what you don't like. That's illegal. Further, that is why 23 states and Washington, D.C. sued the EPA in the U.S. Court of Federal Claims, and 22 states and Washington, D.C. sued the EPA in U.S. District Court. And that is why our own Vermont Attorney General, Charity Clark, is in the midst of this fight to hold the EPA accountable for its illegal termination of solar for all. Let me bring the Attorney General forward. Attorney General.
Thank you, Senator, for being here, but for your vision and your leadership on Solar for All, and thank you for your support in defending it. Last week, my office, along with 21 state attorneys general across this country, filed 2 lawsuits to protect Solar for All. The cases are our 30th and 31st lawsuits that we have filed since late January when Donald Trump took office. The first case was a contracts-based case. Those have to be filed in this circumstance in the U.S. Federal Court of Claims. And the second was a case brought in Washington State Court and Federal District Court, and those were for the claims involving the constitutional violation. The separation of powers clause specifically was violated, as well as the Administrative Procedures Act. That act is a law that basically tells the president's administration how to conduct business. I want to acknowledge the 3 lawyers in my office who work on this. They are Solicitor General John Rose, Deputy Solicitor General Ryan Kane, and our new Assistant Attorney General, Sam Stratton. Special thanks to the legislature for creating the position that Sam sits in. He personally is the lawyer who worked on this case that is so important. I am always proud to represent Vermont, but these past few months, representing Vermont in protecting the rule of law has been one of the greatest honors of my life. President Trump is attempting to consolidate power in the executive branch, taking the power away from Congress. He's attempting to channel money away from renewable energy and towards fossil fuels. And no surprise, he loves the fossil fuel companies and the fossil fuel industry because Donald Trump is living in the past. Look at his slogan, Make America Great Again. While we here in Vermont are for progress and we are for the future. The future is renewable energy. Solar for All projects would have created, as the senator mentioned, 8,500 households, solar panels on their roofs or other community projects related to solar, and would have a tremendous impact on the reduction of their electric bills. This would have affected single-family, multi-family affordable housing and managed affordable solar housing programs. Of the $62 million that Vermont received in our account, about 90% or maybe over 90% was swept away and liquidated unconstitutionally and in violation of federal law. These illegal acts means that these 8,500 households are not going to receive the solar panels that they should have received. The hundreds of new green jobs are not going to be created. It's going to be harder for us to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, which we must do under the Global Warming Solutions Act. And our goal of environmental justice will be stymied. The state is also going to lose thousands of hours of time that we already invested in building up this program and preparing to spend the rest of the $62 million. President Trump and his administration are attacking our very foundations of democracy, the rule of law, the Constitution, which I swore an oath to uphold when I was sworn in January. And every single time the president violates federal law or the Constitution, I will be there for Vermont to protect you. I take my responsibility as AG to protect Vermont and Vermonters very seriously, and that is why we joined this lawsuit. I want to close by just saying thank you again to Senator Sanders for your tremendous leadership on this and many issues. I know you are a beacon of hope for Vermonters when we look at Washington, so thank you.
Thank you very much.
And now I think we have some time for questions.
Ask her the hard ones.
Senator, are you worried that the Trump administration will impound funds for other IRA projects? And also, what does the Supreme Court say about this? Have they weighed in?
Look, good question. Am I worried? Of course I'm worried. You have a president who is undermining the Constitution of the United States every day, the separation of powers that's in the Constitution, who is denying states the funding that has been appropriated in the normal legislative process. So you have a president who acts illegally, and that is why Attorney General Clark and other attorneys general throughout the country are taking him on. And by the way, attorney generals throughout the country have taken him on many, many issues, and they are winning. So we look forward to winning this fight for legislation that will lower electric costs for some 900,000 American households, over 8,000 in the state of Vermont. This is what the American people want, what they need. We're going to take Trump on. We're going to defeat him.
What is the timeline, Senator, for this legal process to run its course? I mean, you could
I'll
just
let the lawyer answer.
Just run out the clock, you know?
Yeah, so the process, as it normally happens, takes a very, very long time. We are currently looking at whether or not we have the grounds to file a motion for preliminary injunction, which you've seen us do repeatedly, and that would require action be taken much sooner. That hasn't at this point been filed, so we will keep you posted on that.
Senator, related to climate change, what we're talking about here, I think the president denied a disaster declaration for Vermont and a few other blue states while approving it for red states. Have you heard about that?
Oh, I have. Denied an $18 billion infrastructure program for New Jersey and New York. Look, you have a president, again, who does not believe in the rule of law, does not believe in the Constitution. Who would have imagined? I mean, really, whether you have been a Republican president in the past, a Democratic president who says, oh, your state voted against me. I'm sorry, you're not going to get any money. Oh, your state voted for me. Hey, guess what? Here's more money. That is not only, that is so un-American. It is just hard to put words in that. And needless to say, we're going to fight that as well. I mean, the bottom line is legislation has been passed which appropriates money for Vermont, California, for New York. Yes, states that actually voted against Donald Trump. Last that I heard, that is not a crime. All right? So yes, we're going to deal with that issue.
And what does that mean just for Vermonters that are waiting on, I'm thinking Sutton, right? You know, there are people that
It's
get hard.
obviously not a good thing. It's obviously a bad thing. But once again, the idea that a president would say, I'm going to reward you for voting for me, and I'm going to punish you because you voted against me, is clearly not what the United States of America is supposed to be about. And we will deal with that. I mean, we're dealing with that right now.
And Senator, so earlier today, Vermont has been working, as we know, Vermont and New York have been working to rebuild their relationship with Canada. Governor Phil Scott has mentioned that, and many other local politicians have as well. But earlier today, Trump says he will no longer continue trade negotiations with Canada.
And what was the reason for that? It must have been some profound, deep reason. Tell us what the reason was.
The reason was an advertisement that was played
Lord.
on Canadian television.
Oh, my God. Somebody put up an ad on Canadian television, and therefore we terminate trade discussions. Look, this is what an out-of-control president is about. Once again, somebody puts up an ad on television in Canada, and that is the reason you terminate trade discussions with our strongest ally. If that is not insane, I don't know what is. All right, but this gets back to a president who wants more and more power into his own hands, a president who is attacking the media in this country every day. You're going to run programs that we don't like? Well, we may end up terminating your license. Somebody runs an ad in Canada? Well, we're going to end our trade discussions. This is an out-of-control president, and what the demonstrations last week were 7 million people coming out saying, no kings in America. That's what this is about. We've got to rally the American people to say that we cannot have a megalomaniac as president. Somebody wants more and more power in his own hands. We are a democracy, and the American people understand that.
Senator, also, we're in day 24 of the government shutdown. So many of these programs we're talking about are directly affected by this. How do you see the country getting out of this?
Let me be very clear. This is a difficult issue. I know that people are rightfully very concerned. We talk to federal employees every day who are worried about, including people in my own office, worried about whether or not they're going to get their paychecks. It's a very serious issue. But let me be as clear as I can be. What this shutdown is all about is whether or not 45,000 people, low-income and working-class people in the state of Vermont, will lose their health insurance because of the massive cuts to Medicaid that Trump's big, beautiful bill brought about. 45,000 people. Nationally, 15 million people. What the shutdown is about is whether 30,000 people in the state of Vermont, and they're beginning to see it right now, are going to see a doubling in their health insurance premiums, which are already outrageously high. We pay in Vermont some of the highest prices for health care in the entire country. There was a couple that described in Bennington where I think their premiums are going to quadruple. 50% of their income going to health care. That is insane. There are studies out there from Yale and the University of Pennsylvania which tell us that if 15,000 working class and low-income people are taken off of health care, some 50,000 of them will die unnecessarily every year because they can't afford to go to a doctor. 50,000 Americans dying every year. Now, there are people in Vermont, I'm sure, who may not agree with me, but I am not going to vote for legislation which causes the unnecessary deaths of 50,000 Americans and hundreds of people in the state of Vermont.
Senator, why should the Democratic caucus engage in any kind of legislation in Congress if it just ends up in the president deciding, regardless of what you pass, deciding what's going to become law and what isn't going to become law?
Well, I don't know, it's quite like that. We have an obligation to show the American people what a sane Congress can be, to pass serious pieces of legislation that benefit working class people, and that's what I'm fighting for. This is one of those pieces of legislation, by the way. Anything else?
Senator, are you concerned about
I'm concerned about everything. What in particular?
about the trade relationship between Canada and
course
the
I
US,
am.
specifically for Vermonters, especially as many?
Of course it is. Look, you talk to Vermont businesses. They are hurting. And you know, the irony is Canada is our closest ally. I mean, the northern part of the state, everyone has family on the other side of the border. We are one, you know, we're tied together for decades and decades and decades. And the idea that you have a president who essentially almost accuses Canada of being our enemy is, again, totally insane. But from an economic point of view, no question, this is hurting Vermont. And I just want to tell our Canadian friends that the people in Vermont, the people in America, do not hate Canada. They love Canada. They respect the people of Canada. And we want to have as close a relationship with our Canadian brothers and sisters as we can.
Madam Attorney General, you mentioned this is lawsuit number 31. Are you planning to go to the state legislature in January and maybe ask for, I know you've created positions, but ask for more resources to
Nope.
help with these lawsuits?
That's how good Sam is. That's how good he is. We have Sam to help us with this and other cases, and he's doing a great job. So we won't need anything more.
All right. Okay. Thank you all very much.
Thanks.
Thanks.